Hey, nature photographers, it's Lee. I'm glad to be back with you this week. I am looking forward to sharing with you 3 OM system lenses that I have in my bag that are typically thought about as wide angle. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the differences, which ones, you may not want to own all 3, but which ones would I recommend. I'm going to tell you about how I use them, why I use them the way I do, what trips I tend to take them on, and I'm going to go into a little bit of technical information about them as well as some creative uses. So I know a lot of folks love gear videos. It's ironic to me that videos that are just about gear seem to get a whole lot more views than videos that actually talk about fieldcraft or the creative aspects. Of course, that might explain why we see so many crappy images out on the social media. For those of you that watch all of them and that really learn from the creative ones and leave great comments, thank you so much. I really appreciate your participation in my YouTube channel. And for those of you that just love gear videos, well, here's another one. So I hope you like this one. Let's get rolling. Howdy from West Texas. I'm Lee Hoy, professional nature photographer, and this is my YouTube channel, Lee Hoy Photography. I'm an OM System Ambassador, photography workshop instructor for Wildside Nature Tours of Precision Camera and Video, and contributing author for the Journal of Wildlife Photography. So, without further ado, let's jump right into our lenses that we're going to talk about. The first one I'm going to share with you is the M.Zuiko 7-14 F2.8 PRO lens. Now, this was actually the very first wide-angle lens I bought when I made the switch from Canon to OM System. And I loved it. I used it a lot. It was a go-to wide-angle lens. And, there are a lot of really nice characteristics of this. Obviously, it's a pro lens. And all 3 of the lenses we're going to talk about today all have an IP53 rating. So, splash-proof, freeze-proof, weatherproof kind of stuff. I have no qualms using any of these 3 lenses in extremely challenging climatic conditions such as heavy rain, extreme cold. I've used these lenses as low as around -40. I've had them in my car when it was probably over 130 degrees in the car. So, they hold up really well. Another thing that all 3 of them have in common, of course, is the manual focus clutch. Ironically enough, when I first switched to OM System, I initially hated the manual focus clutch. I now love it. It was funny, I turned them off completely, disabled them for the first 2 or 3 weeks when I made the switch, and now I use them when I need to. So, great feature. And then, of course, all 3 of these lenses are going to offer the LFN button right here on this particular lens. The nice thing about this button is you can program it to a specific feature, both in the OM1 and the OM1 Mark II, the 2 newest bodies. You can do it in some other bodies as well, but those are the 2 that I use. And I love that button. You've got a lot of different things you can assign to it. So let's talk about the 7-14 in particular. Of course, 35mm equivalent. It's a 16-28. So one thing I really like about this lens is the close focus is 2.95 inches. So this isn't a true wide-angle macro lens. Magnification comes in at a 35mm equivalent of 0.22, so just under a quarter life size. But it's as close as we have. That's one lens I really want in the future, is a full life-size wide-angle macro lens. Something in the 8mm range to 10, that would be perfect. But this lens I used a lot early on, okay? Because it was my primary wide-angle lens. When I traded in a big Canon 600 version 2 lens, this was one of the things I picked up when I made that trade. Now, another thing about it, retail price is around $1,400. Of course, the lenses, OM System does a good job of putting lenses on sale. Sometimes you pick it up for $100 off, $200, $300 off. Sure, there's some really nice used copies out there as well. So, let's talk about how I use this lens. I will be honest, when the next lens we're going to look at came out, this did not come out of my bag as much, and I'll share those reasons with you. There are a couple. Number one, because it has this big bulbous lens element right here, it does not handle sun flare as well as some other M.Zuiko lenses. I shoot into the sun a lot. I really enjoy landscapes shot into the sun, and that was kind of a challenge, okay? It would flare a little too bad at times for me when I was shooting directly into the sun. I think, too, because it has this bulbous end, this lens cannot use screw-on filters, okay? And that was a challenge because in order to use filters, you have to have some kind of a special adapter for this lens. That's where this comes in, okay? So you can't use screw-on filters, but you can use square filters if you have the right adapter. Now this adapter is from Nisi. I'm trying to find where the name is here, right here, Nisi. And this is made specifically for the 7-14 lens. So I'm going to show you how it goes on. The way this works, you know, the word Nisi goes at the top. Okay, you're going to slide it. Let me make sure I'm holding my lens here correctly. Okay, it's going to go onto the lens like so. Okay, and the way you hold it onto the lens, and it's a little challenging to do this at this angle, you spin this little element here and it locks it, kind of screws it on to that built-in hood, lens hood, okay? So it is on there, and then you can screw this down and it's gonna be on there really nice and tight. You know, I'm holding it, a little risky, right? I'm holding it by that filter. I cannot pull that off. I'm sure if I exerted enough force, like an idiot, then I could pull it off. I don't want to do that, but I have no qualms holding it just by that. It is good and tight. Now, if I need to rotate my filters, I can loosen that up a little bit and rotate a little bit. But usually once you get it on, you should be aligned with the screw device here for your drop-in filters. So in order to use filters with this lens, you have to have this special adapter. Now, I will tell you, I am starting to use this lens a lot more. Of course, this 7-14 is 2.8. This has always been my main go-to night sky lens. Number one, hands down, my favorite night sky lens. But, and because I had no problem with flare or any kind of issues like that at night, I wasn't using it as much as I use the next lens I'm going to talk about. I like using filters a lot in landscape photography, and this isn't always the most convenient method. I use it and it comes in handy, but I will tell you what has helped me bring this lens back out of my camera bag more. And I wonder if you can guess it. It is the live graduated neutral density filter built into the OM1 Mark II. Okay, so that feature has helped cut down on some of the glare, you know, on some of the flaring, and it's made this lens back in a favored position in my camera bag. So the built-in graduated neutral density filter, yeah, had no problem using it with the built-in neutral density filter, but a lot of times shooting sunsets or sunrises, I needed that graduated neutral density filter, and it was just easier to do it with other lenses, okay? You know, because I didn't have to have a special adapter for filters. It would made it a lot easier. So the built-in graduated neutral density filter makes this a much favored lens once again. I'd used it heavily for the first few years, and then I'll be honest, the next lens I'm going to talk about is the H25 F4.0. That became my predominant landscape lens for a while. This is an excellent quality lens. You know, another nice thing about it, it just doesn't weigh all that much. I mean, it's probably just maybe a hair over a pound. But here are some of the trips that I like to use this lens on. All of my night sky trips, if I think I'm going to take a single night sky image, this lens is in my bag. No doubt about it. If I know I'm going to have big, gargantuan landscape features very close, okay, I'm going to bring this lens. What happens when we get to big, grandiose scenes and we pull out wide-angle lenses like this in that 7-14 range? It pushes, you know, when you take a picture, wide angle makes everything smaller. So it can make grandiose scenes seem not so grand at times. So you really have to understand when you want a super wide angle lens. And if I know I'm going to be super close to features like in Patagonia, you're very close to some very big mountains at times, this lens is going to come in handy. if I'm going to have big skies, if I'm going to have like monsoon season places, like here in Big Bend where I live, man, June, July, August, this is staying with me a lot because monsoons pop up. Everybody says, well, you always need a foreground feature in your landscape images. You don't really. If you have an awesome enough sky, stormy sky, that can carry an image. You don't always need foreground elements. Sure, they're nice. I like them too, but sometimes if I want to have big, grandiose skies and big scenes, this lens is going to take those skies in. Now, they often say, you can't really do panoramics with this lens. Well, I'm going to show you one I've done. And the only images I'm going to show you on each of these three lenses are images that I've taken thus far this year. I haven't used this one a ton, but I've got a few cool images I'm going to share with you here in a minute that I took with this lens. But, it doesn't take up much space. So if there's the slightest chance of a night sky image, giant landscape elements up close, big skies, right? This is going in the bag. If I know I'm going to be standing in a waterfall and I want to try to cover as much ground as possible, this is going to be in my bag. I really think that live graduated neutral density filter brings this baby back to the forefront of discussion of how much you use it. Beautiful lens, great construction quality, very durable. I am not easy on my gear. My lenses, my bodies look worn out, beat up. I don't baby gear. I'm here to use it. It's a tool. Very happy with this lens. Again, if you want to use drop-in filters with it, you're going to need a special adapter. I really like the design of the Nisi adapter, and I will put an affiliate link down below for you on that, as well as my affiliate link is down there for this lens. If you shoot night sky, this is probably my favorite lens of all of them. I'd love like a 10 millimeter. I have the 1.8. I like that. That's a great lens. I would love maybe not a fisheye, and maybe something in the 10 millimeter range that's not a fisheye, like a 1.8, something like that would be great. I'd love that, but I'm very happy with this for night sky. It's a great lens. So let's take a look at some images that I've captured this year using this lens. All right, so here we go. So this first image was taken at a state park not far from my house. This is Davis Mountain State Park. And as you can see, there was a beautiful moonbow that evening, almost full encompassing the moon that night. I was actually out recording a video for YouTube that I haven't finished yet, but turned around and saw this and I was like, oh my goodness, I got to stop and get some shots. So the 7-14, again, one of my go-to night sky lenses. What I did is I used Starry Sky autofocus. If you see this star right up here near my cursor, that is what I focused on, that star right there. So I would move it where the moon was not in view. Otherwise, it'd be so bright, it would have made it a little more challenging for the Starry Sky autofocus. But I focused there, and I wanted a big scene. That shelter is a CCC WPA era built overlook, and actually looking towards my home. I live about 5 miles as the crow flies, but it takes about 50-something miles to drive over there. So you can see nice detail in the foreground. The sky's handled lovely. But that's one of the images I captured earlier this year. Let's take a look at the next one. So here I moved closer to the shelter, and you'll notice a hair bit of flare on that shelter because of the bulbous lens element from the 7-14. So I tried putting the moon right on the corner, created just a little bit of flare. I could spend a little time and clean that up if I have some time at some point. I probably will. But as I got closer, I definitely needed that wider perspective, and the 7-14 really did well right here. Of course, when I moved my tripod, I had to refocus. I reoriented my camera up to those bright stars, focused, and then repositioned for this composition. Okay. Here near the same area in this state park is looking out over Fort Davis, Texas, the little town near where I live, and a blue hour shot. And you can see, again, nice detail in the foreground, some really lovely starbursts out there on the city lights, and then, you know, the nice colors in the sky. Nice big field of view. I didn't have anything monstrous that I wanted to maintain that perspective. I actually wanted to show a big part of town here as the sun was preparing to come up. There it is just a little later. You can see my camera's basically in the same position, framed just a hair differently. And now, you know, we're hitting golden hour. So we went from blue hour to golden hour. Sun is not quite, you know, quite up over the horizon, but by golly, we are on our way towards sunset. But again, nice detail in the foreground, you know, nice detail out there in the shadows, nice sharp shot. Now, they say don't do panoramics with super wide angle lenses, but I don't listen to those kind of things. And I think this one turned out pretty lovely. Yeah, you see a little bit of distortion in the foreground there, but if you've not been to that spot, you would know it. So the reality is I think the sky turns out pretty well. You know, you can see got rain off to the right, and the sun's starting to come up over there on the left. So again, even a panoramic using that wide angle lens. And this is a 3-image panoramic instead of the other one was more than that. This is a 3-image panoramic that I stitched together, and really happy with the results here. Obviously, sun is now risen. It's up in the sky more. The colors are completely different, but handled the detail in the rocks in the foreground. Lovely colors in the sky. Again, just a pleasing image. Later that night, about 3.5 hours away, had a very bright moon, and that was what illuminated the foreground. This is a beautiful overlook along the Rio Grande River, just to the west of Big Bend National Park. And, you know, focused on this, there's only one star visible because it was cloudy and a little early. This is not nighttime yet. This is I believe civil twilight, if I remember the time correctly. Maybe a little later. Might have actually been nighttime, because when you have such a bright moon, the sky is going to be blue anyways. But as you can see, nice bright colors, captured a lot of nice detail there in the foreground, and again, very nice sharp image. Super pleased with the 7-14. So those are some of the images that I've captured thus far this year. I haven't had it out a lot, basically just a day or two, but the best season for it is coming up. Yeah, you can do Milky Way earlier in the year. Unfortunately, thus far, when it's been nice night skies, I've been away from home every single time. So that's part of life when you travel as a photography workshop instructor. Well, let's talk about another lens in this lineup that I absolutely love, and that is going to be the 8 to 25 millimeter F4.0 Pro lens. Now, this comes with a lens hood that I have lost, misplaced, who knows where it is. I've ordered another one, but it normally has a lens hood with this. This, I'm going to tell you about when I first heard about this lens. OM System asked me, since I'm an ambassador, to shoot this lens before it was released. You know, they wanted some shots to use for advertising and get some feedback and whatnot. And I'll be honest, when they told me they were sending me this lens, well, I already had the 7-14, and I went, why are they sending me this lens? Why are they making a lens that overlaps with this? I don't need this. I'll go shoot it, but, right? Well, as soon as I shot with this lens, I was in New Mexico. I was on a trip with my wife in Taos. And that night, I can place pre-orders early on some gear. That's one of the benefits of being an ambassador. That night, I placed a pre-order. And I'll tell you why. Because I shoot into the sun a lot, it handles flare a lot better than the 7-14. And it should. You know, it doesn't have that big bulbous lens element that the 7-14 has. It's kind of a no-brainer. But it's also got the LFN button, you know, and it takes those screw-in filters. And it uses a 72 millimeter filter size, which the nice thing is that matches the third lens I'm going to tell you about today. So screw-on filters, that is so much easier. Now, I know what a lot of people might be saying, why is that a consideration when we have built-in live neutral density filter, and now in the OM1 Mark II, live graduated neutral density filter? Well, because let's say we want to do a high-res shot, or, you know, we're going to use live composite. Well, live composite, your minimum shutter speed's 1/2 second. What if you need to use a neutral density filter? You can't use the built-in one and live composite. So I still carry physical filters for those times where I'm going to use computational photography features that won't then allow me to also use a built-in filter. So I carry neutral density filters, I carry circular polarizers, obviously, which it's going to be really hard probably to get that built in. Maybe they come up with a way, I can't imagine. And this for me becomes an advantage between the 7-14 and the 8-25 screw-on filters. Just for that speed, that quickness. If I'm going to be out shooting harsh light, black and white landscape in Big Bend, I have a circular polarizer on here all the time, and this is my main lens. Okay, this is going to be my main lens for that. It's just going to be easier to do the circular polarizer on that than it would be with the 7-14. Yes, I can use one using that adapter, but it's just easier. And I have found that this lens is really sharp, and all three of these lenses are super sharp. I mean, they're pro lenses, high quality lenses. But overall, this is probably my number one go-to landscape lens. The 7-14 is my number one night sky lens and second landscape lens, although I think it's going to face a tough challenge from this third one. So the H24 has a few things I really like to share with you about. So basically it's a 16 to 50 millimeter, 35 millimeter equivalent. It weighs under a pound, coming in at 14.5 ounces. That is light. That is nice. It focuses at 9 inches. That's a great feature. And its magnification, 35 millimeter equivalent, is 0.42, which is almost half life size all the way throughout the range. That's a nice feature. So, let's say I want to do some wide angle habitat shots of a rattlesnake. This would be a great lens because I'm going to get that thing half life size in that image, right? So, the retail price on this one comes in around $1,099. It's actually a little cheaper than the 7-14, which, hey, that's nice, man. We all like putting money in our pocket. Again, this thing goes on sale. Watch for that. So when do I take this? Anytime I might take any landscape shots. This is for sure in my bag. The 825 is always in my bag if there's even the slightest possibility of landscape shots. Occasionally some street photography, which I don't get the chance to do a lot. It's not my main thing. I do enjoy it though. And it will also go in my bag occasionally if I know I'm going to have super close wildlife. Super close, like on the Galapagos, I might take this one, although the third lens I tend to take more. But really good lens. If you're a landscape shooter and you use OM system, this should be in your bag, no doubt about it. Yeah, it'd be nice if it were 2.8. Honestly, if this were 2.8, I wouldn't have the 7-14, okay? I mean, this is close enough in range and even a little more that it would be outstanding. And I don't know if they'll ever make a 2.8 in this. I mean, obviously it'd be heavier. I doubt you could get a flat element. That's the key. I don't know. Be tough to do. It might make it a really good size lens. Be cool to see what those specs would look like, wouldn't it? But I am very happy. This lens gets a lot of use, and rightfully so it should. But I think for the magnification, the close focus distance, this is a tough one. If you do landscape, this should for sure be in your bag, okay? So that's the second lens. And so now let's take a look at some of the images I've taken so far this year with that lens. Now, ironically enough, the first image to share is another bow, but this time it's a sun bow. It is not a moon bow. This is in Grand Teton National Park earlier this year, early January. I have not had a chance to do the H25 millimeter much. I've been doing a lot of wildlife photography so far this year, and this image I love. We were looking at Mormon Row, and then I look back to the left, and bam, here's this again almost full bow, sun bow. Beautiful scene, capturing the snow, and I did not have the OM1 Mark II just yet, I believe. I don't think I did. So yeah, no, because I had it for Amazon as my first trip. I did not have it, or I would have probably turned on the graduated neutral density filter. Didn't need it. I was able to balance my exposure nicely without it, but I still probably would have turned it on. But again, handles the images nice, sharp, detail, great color rendition, just a lovely image, Here we are in Yellowstone. I'd walked out a little ways, this nice stormy sky. Yellowstone in winter always presents some beautiful scenery. No massive element, no great foreground element, just mainly wanted the sky in contrast with that vibrant white snow to stand out. And here we had a beautiful sunrise one morning. We're mainly looking for wolves and wildlife, but man, we came around the corner. Love the color cast on the snow. You can see it balanced, the color of the sky with the snow quite well. And again, great detail there in the bushes in the front, the sagebrush, and nice sharp horizon. I love the H25. This would again, I did not have the OM1 Mark II yet, so I did not use a graduated neutral density filter, or I certainly would have. But there was enough sky and enough reflected light off the snow where I could maintain some nice detail in the foreground. So I probably had to open up the foreground just a hair to open up some of the shadows, but other than that, love this image. And here in Patagonia, I use the H25 on an image where, just with a little longer exposure to get some nice movement in the river. That is Fitzroy Peak in El Chalten. And I think that national park is called Los Glaciares National Park in Argentina. And that I had both the 12-100 and the H25. I shot a lot of my images from this particular location with the 12-100, and you'll see a few of those. But the H25 is generally my go-to landscape lens, and here you see why. I haven't got to use it a lot yet this year, but my favorite season for summertime coming up out here, I'll hopefully get some nice opportunities. So the third lens I'm going to tell you about today is a lens that honestly I had not even originally planned to buy. I had no thoughts, didn't see a need for it. And my wife for a while was kind of doing photography. She wants to get back into it. But the irony is I bought this lens for her and then she wasn't using it. And so I decided to grab it and started using it and told her I wasn't going to give it back. I love this lens. This is the M.Zuiko 12-100 F4 IS PRO. So unlike the other two lenses, this has IS sync capability. So when used with a body with image stabilization, this gives you up to 6.5 stops of image stabilization. And given that this is my go-to street photography lens, that is a huge advantage when it comes to using this lens. Let's talk about some of the specs. And a couple of things. The 7-14 and the H25 are internal zooms, okay? So you spin it, they don't increase in length. That's an internal zoom. Whereas the 12-100 is an external zoom, right? Okay. Of course, it also has a lens hood with it, which I use the lens hood with all of these when I haven't lost them, okay? So, of course, the 7-14, the lens hood is built in, rightfully so. But the 12-100 F4 has taken a much more dominant role since I took it a couple of years ago to the Galapagos Islands. So it's 12-100, so 24-200, 35 millimeter equivalent. Very strong build quality. Has the LFN button just like all three, manual focus clutch, just like the other two, right? Again, a lot of the same great features. It only weighs 1.23 pounds, so it's not that much heavier than the H25. And given the focal range, that's pretty impressive. Now, the close focus is 5.9 inches. That's impressive. And it has a magnification range of from 0.6 to 0.42. So it hovers just above and just below half life size. So you can do some, half life size, not true macro. True macro begins at 1:1. So, 1:1, the life size is the same size it is, on your sensor. But for half life size, this has a lot of options for photography. Now the retail price on this, $13.99, right around that of the 7-14. Filter size 72. The beauty of that means that any filter you buy for the H25 will also fit the 12-100 and vice versa. So that's a huge benefit of owning these two lenses. Okay, if you don't do night sky photography, The H25 and the 12 to 100, yeah, they overlap a little bit, but this gives you a little extra reach for street photography when you want to maybe be a little less inconspicuous, right? Or you want to be a little more inconspicuous. So for me, this is surprisingly become one of my favorite lenses. And I say surprisingly because initially when it came out, I had no intention of buying it. But I just took it to Cuba, and this was on my body all the time. One of my second body, my long lens, the 150 to 400s on another body all the time. So I had it with me in Patagonia because I went straight from Cuba to Patagonia. Was very happy with some of the results that you'll see here in a little bit on that. Now this lens will also do the drive mode up to 50 frames per second. And that comes in handy because with a 200 millimeter, this can be a good safari lens. You know, when you get big mammals up close, you know, where you don't need 600 millimeters of reach to get out there, this would have a good role to play. You know, if you said, should I take the 12 to 100 or the 40 to 150? Oh my gosh, you know, this 12 millimeters is going to be able to, you know, you can do some landscape shots with it, and you can do some large mammal stuff. So it's a very capable lens. And then say you're on safari and you're going to walk around one of the big cities, well, then you got your street photography lens all in one. Let's say you're a general travel photographer and you don't want to own more than one lens, but you want to have good high quality. I would say take this. The 12 to 100 would be the number one lens I would recommend to that person that wants to own one or two lenses and they don't do birds. You know, this would be the best walk around lens, I think, to put in your bag. So say you're a photographer and you got a spouse that likes to dabble. This would be the lens for them. You could buy it for them and then abscond with it later, right? Like I did. I really would, if you do, you know, if you're one of those that always has a camera on you to capture, you know, street scenes or landscapes, this would be a good lens to keep with you all the time on that. So I'm very happy with all three of these lenses, but I use them for different things. Like, you know, I took this to Cuba again, landscape, street photography, some wildlife. It is very versatile, and if you're serious about your photography, it should probably be in your bag. All right, well, that's the 12 to 100. Now let's take a look at some of the images I've captured with it this year. I have used this lens quite a bit. I had it in Cuba and Patagonia, and so I'll have quite a few street photography images here, and not something you normally see from me. I often joke that there's rarely people in my images. If I get the chance to do some nice street photography, I do enjoy it. I am not a master. I'm not an expert. I think I capture some nice images employing some of the same skills that you employ in wildlife photography, but there are major differences as well. So without further ado, let's take a look at some of my images from this year. I have more than I did on the other lenses. So one of the things in Cuba we get to do is go to a barn and watch them actually roll some Cuban cigars. I'd never smoked a cigar in my life, and I thought, well, I'm in Cuba, I should, and I'm sure they're fine to you cigar aficionados. I felt like I'd rather have licked the bottom of someone's boot, but by golly, I smoked a cigar, a Cuban cigar. I've done it once, bucket list checked, never need to do again. That was disgusting. So, but made for some lovely images while he sat inside the tobacco drying barn, rolled some cigars for us. He's, I think, 4th or 5th generation on this tobacco farm. So the 12 to 100 is very versatile because our zoom range is so broad. And for street photography, when you don't necessarily want to be wasting a lot of time, you know, he would flare, that lighter would flare up when he'd go to light that cigar. And I really want to try to capture some really nice moments. Gives you good range in your tones, you can see here, and, you know, nice color. I really like this image, and this lens was just perfect. And being just barely over a pound makes it great for street photography because I'm not worried about weight. Here's one of our clients on the Cuba. He goes with me. He and his wife have been with me. They'll soon be with me now on 5 continents. They're going to India with me this next year. So had some cigars here in the ashtray, and he was sitting in a chair in the background. And I love this. I like this image a lot. Some like it in color more. I like it in black and white. But again, this lens is so perfect. You know, it focuses close, which is really beneficial. and it handles so well. And because it's so light, I don't put a vertical grip on the body I use for street photography. So I don't mind shooting vertical with that because it's such a light combination. As we were walking by a restaurant that I later had the best smoked pork chop of my life in, one of the waitresses was really, I don't know if she did that on purpose. If, obviously she's very photogenic, a beautiful Cuban woman, but I love the look she threw, the framing, the light, the colors, the contrast in that image, I think is lovely. I love her pose. I don't know if she was aggravated. I don't know if she was just giving me a little look. Whatever it was, she did perfect. So I really like this image. And again, you see that this lens handles street photography really well. Nice man in Cuba. I was taught by some our local Cuban guides that traditionally a lot of people sit that way. You lean your chair back, you sit back, and you'll see how wooden chairs get worn from that. It was really interesting to note that culturally. But again, because I'm a fairly good ways away, I did not want him to notice me. I did not want him looking at the camera. And because I had a longer focal length, it allowed me to zoom in, capture that image, and not disturb him in the least. Here is an intentional blur where I'm using a slow shutter speed. I held the camera still, so this is not intentional camera movement, but it is an intentional blur. Lots of cool classic cars being driven around Cuba, and I love this combination of the flags with the statue. And then I set my exposure where I would get a blur from a car coming, and I just kept firing away with a fairly decent frame rate. I think I was doing 20 frames per second, and just caught the car in the right position, just enough blur that it's moving, but enough detail where you can see what's going on. I really like this image from Cuba. Again, more street photography. I love the composition. I love the colors. And the 12-100 is wide enough where here you see this is a pretty good building, but I had more than enough width in terms of a wide field of view to be able to capture the entire front of this building. I just waited for them to walk into the right position, and their leg position, everything else just came together. The colors, I love this image. I really like that image. That would look great on acrylic. This apartment building here, I love the painted Cuban flag, the green light coming out of the door, the laundry. There's a lot of elements that are very recognizable in Havana in this image, and it handles things like this perfectly. Being a 4.0, I'm sure some people would like for it to be even faster, but the reality is, for a lot of the street photography I do, I don't need a shallower depth of field. I can handhold it. A 12-100. I have no qualms taking some shots at 1/20th of a second, or there maybe even a little lower, and getting some sharp shots. So kind of a similar type image. A lady is preparing her storefront for the day on one of the squares. And, I took a bunch of pictures as she would come and hang these gourds in the window there. And, I like the symmetry, but I like that it's broken up with the door being open and her on the left with the hats, the gourds, the Moroccos. Lots of different elements in this image, and I think it comes together quite well. And then a very simple shot with this pigeon in this barred window. I knew it was going to be a black and white image. It's probably about as far out on kind of some of the artsy kind of things as I might do on something like that. What I wish I could have been is a little higher up and been a little more square to the window. But again, that 12-100, I didn't have a lot of the road we were in was pretty narrow, so I couldn't back up further. And again, that 12 millimeter, 24 millimeter, 35 millimeter equivalent comes in pretty handy in situations like this, So I love how this shot turned out. This little storefront was so colorful. And then you've got the guy on the bicycle sitting still, but everybody else is moving. And I did that intentionally with shutter speed. I was hoping he would sit still. And, there's something, all the people being on the left side of the door, you might think, well, is the visual balance off? But in street photography, I tend to look at it a little bit differently than I might my wildlife photography. And I really like this image. There's some really unique things about it. And again, the 12-100, look at those colors. Beautiful colors, nice detail in the shadows, great detail in the highlights. And that focal length is so versatile. It was just perfect for, we spent 2.5 days in Havana, and I took full advantage of this lens. And then here in Patagonia, the 12 to 100. So I showed you the picture with the 8 to 25. Well, here I zoomed in to get a kind of a more intimate portrait, if you will, of the mountains there, Fitzroy Peak at Los Glaciares National Park in Argentina. And there I zoomed in a lot more. So the light changed later in the morning, zoomed in, and the balance of the clouds. You've got the blue light where there's shadow, and the golden light where the sun is hitting. And, this lens handled that balance beautifully. Look at the detail. You've got plenty of detail in the shadows, plenty of detail in the sky. Nothing's blown out. Again, very versatile, very reliable lens. Use it for this waterfall. I did not want to go farther left because there was some bright sun hitting up there. I did have the OM1 Mark II, and if I'm going to tell you what I did, you see that little rock in the upper left corner? There's a little bit of rock that sticks out above the green. Well, the sun was hitting that. I moved the graduated neutral density filter all the way up to that corner to hold that back. You would never know there was bright sun hitting that. So that is awesome. So many great uses with the live graduated neutral density filter. And yet one more image of Fitzroy Peak. Nice detail in the shadows. So I think you see a lot of cool images with that lens. And these are just images I've taken already this year. And I plan to keep using these lenses quite a bit. And I hope you've really enjoyed taking a look at these images with the 12 to 100. All right, everyone, I appreciate you watching. I hope that today's video has maybe helped you with some purchase decisions, maybe how to use some of these lenses, maybe, filters. And by the way, when it comes to filters, I'm a huge fan of NISI, NISI filters. I love the quality of their filters. So yes, we have them built into our bodies, but you still need them for other purposes. So I'll put an affiliate link down below for those, to the ones I like to use. I hope that if you have questions about one of these lenses, feel free to ask me. I'm happy to answer. I'm trying to keep up with comments as I have time. Sometimes all of a sudden one pops up and says, "Oh, I haven't responded to this," and it hadn't shown me that for weeks. I don't know. I don't fully understand why YouTube hides some from me, but I try to catch up with all of them. So if I haven't hit yours, I apologize. I will try to get to it. And hey, thanks for being a part of my channel. Y'all have a great day. Hop out there, go get some great shots.